Back from SEC Media Day with Rusty Mansell, the co-owner and publisher for Dawgs HQ. You're also heavily involved with high school recruiting, especially here in the state of Georgia, and that's where I want to start. With as much as everybody talks about what college athletics has turned into,
Yep.
how much have you seen it change on the high school recruiting side of things?
Well, talk about NIL.
Yeah.
I'm involved with Georgia High School in some fashion or form, so kind of involved in some of the private communications. And I think everybody got really paranoid, thinking, "Oh my gosh, NIL is going to change high school sports, and all these kids going to be doing this." It hasn't really changed. Like kids aren't making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Regions Bank's not sponsoring a tight end from Rome High School. You know what I mean? There's some kids that had some deals that I would say were pretty large, some trading cards and stuff like that, and that's what NIL is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gotten too crazy as far as that side of it. I'm certainly, if I have a kid at Southeast Bullock that has some marketability and somebody want to give him a couple $100 a month or $1,000 a month, I love that. I don't think it's really changed. I think everybody got really worried. Now, will it start trickling down into high school more now through colleges? I hope not. We just don't need that type of kind of decisions by young people. But if you can go out and make, as a kid at Cass, Bear McWhorter, who was on a billboard in Cartersville on I-75, he took a lot of his money that he made from that and donated to charity. So that's good stuff there too.
What would you say, as far as the impact goes? We just talked about NIL. Would you say, obviously, the transfer portal when it comes to high school, that was a bigger impact than
Yes.
probably this
Yeah,
NIL
that was a
stuff?
bigger
I know
impact.
that was
Yeah.
a huge issue
Yeah,
that we kind of ran into.
that's a big deal. When I have to have that conversation with I get high school coaches all the time going, "Hey, can you speak to our parents because we're telling them this and they're not believing us."
Mhm.
It certainly is something that you deal with, and it's unfortunate. And you know, I I understand some of the colleges I talk to. I'm like, "Hey, man, y'all gonna recruit high school?" And he's like, "Rusty, if I sign a kid, I gotta wait 2 years, I might get fired."
Yep.
You know, when I can go out and sign a kid that has tape from college, I know more about that kid than I do this high school kid
Mhm.
that the guy in front of him is not a college athlete. So I kind of get both sides of it. I hate that part of it. It certainly affects a lot of schools and a lot of high schools, and it's taken away a lot of opportunities. I think there's a different path. I had to, I don't really try to make decisions for people, but if I know them and they ask me, I'm like, look, there's nothing wrong with going to a lower level school and getting some tape and then go, the path now is this, this, this.
Yep.
Or you can obviously, if you go to Georgia and you can't play, you can come down and you still can maintain all your goals.
Mhm.
That's one of the things that I think everybody's had to adjust to. But I certainly know, someone like you that was involved in heavily recruiting for your school, a lot of people around the state that handles recruiting, I know they're dealing with those issues. And there's a lot of kids that aren't playing college football, unfortunately, because of the transfer portal.
Yep.
Dive into this 2025 Georgia club, and obviously the biggest thing that everybody's going to be talking about these next couple of days is what quarterback looks like. Gunnar
Mm-hmm.
Stockton coming in, taking over as QB1 for Kirby Smart. You've seen him for a long
Mm-hmm.
time, like we talked about,
Yep.
heavily involved with high school recruiting in the state of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen him for a long time. You've seen him succeed for a long
Mm-hmm.
time. Tell everybody that hasn't seen him what they're getting at quarterback for Georgia.
Can I say ass? Is that
Sure.
tough? He's a tough
Yeah,
ass kid,
fine.
and if y'all get in trouble, I'm sorry. Put that
There's
on
probably
me.
been worse that was
He's a
said this morning
Yeah,
on the
he's a
radio.
probably.
tough joker. I think he's wired right. I think he has a lot of respect. The quarterback position to me, I've said this a lot of times. It's the one position in sports where the 10 other people in the huddle have to believe in you. It's not in baseball. You can do the ground balls and all that kind of stuff. This guy touches the ball every single play. He's making the decision for 10 other people every time. I think Gunner's got that. I'm not going to beat around the bush and say that there's not questions about him. You start talking about. You look at week 3, he's got to go to Knoxville
Yeah.
and be the guy. And you'll walk into Neyland Stadium at 3:30, and they hadn't beat Georgia in a while. They're gonna be ready for Gunner to get there. So we're all going to find out together how he acts in there. But if you look at Gunner's skill set wise, he's bigger than Stetson Bennett. He's thicker. You know what I mean? So he's not. I think first thing people see in him is like, damn, he's legit 6 foot, probably 6'1.5". He's got a great arm. He can hurt you with his legs. I think he's got great deep ball accuracy. The one thing that kind of worries me just a little bit is if you watch him in the spring game and you watch him against Notre Dame, I think he had 3 batted balls in the spring game. I think he had 2 batted balls against Notre Dame. And you guys, and you especially know being around coaching, you get batted balls and nothing good comes from that. So
Yep.
I don't know. I just don't know if it was kind of a bad run because I do know that he is taller than Stetson, and
Yep.
Stetson never worried me about getting batted balls. So I would imagine that's going to be an emphasis on something. But you know that teams watch tape, and they're going to know to get their hands up on him. Is it as a release point, that type of thing? I don't know. But in between the tackles, he's had some balls batted, and some of those things right there, some of those things you just you worry about balls in the air, stuff like that.
So one thing, obviously, you talk about comparing him a little bit to Stetson as far as,
Yeah.
he's little bit bigger in stature and that kind of stuff. And we actually were talking about it this morning, and that was kind of my comparison,
Mm-hmm.
was that he reminded me of a Stetson Bennett with just the grit and the
Yeah,
grind,
wired,
and just
wired
he's
like
just
that.
a gamer.
Yep.
But one thing that we had talked about this morning that, it always worried me with Stetson, but he always came through in the long
Oh
run,
boy.
was taking those risks
Yep.
every now and then.
Yep.
The rolling out to the
Tight
right,
window.
throwing across your body back to the other side of the field. And, Stetson was able to sometimes made some mistakes and threw some interceptions, but also made some really big plays as well. Is that something that we're probably going to see from Gunner, just with him being young and still kind of developing as well as a quarterback?
Yeah, I think Gunner's going to take some chances, and I think Stetson used to take chances. I think the most underrated thing, and you kind of touched on it there, the thing with Stetson is I don't know that I've ever seen at Georgia specifically a quarterback that was better in the fourth quarter every time. Like if the game was on the line, Stetson Bennett, you were going to have to outscore Georgia. Ohio State almost did, but they
Mm-hmm.
didn't stop him in the second half.
Yeah.
You look at the Alabama game when Alabama and Indianapolis comes back to take the lead on that fumble. I think Stetson Bennett was like 9 for 9 with 2 touchdowns in that fourth quarter, and he got better as the game went on. We don't know that about Gunner, but
Yep.
you start talking about the moxie, you start talking about the grit. He's going to throw some balls in tight windows. Stetson did that at times too. I think that Gunner can hurt you with his legs too, but those are things we're going to find out. What's the decision and what's going to happen when they're down 14 in the fourth quarter because he's never faced that.
Yep.
Talk about the mentality of this team, especially under Kirby Smart. We've talked a lot about it. Of this team believes a lot more than teams across the country because you've seen the elevation of this program back to where a lot of Georgia fans expect to be competing for a national championship every year. Talk about that mentality around this team because it hasn't necessarily always been there for
I
Georgia.
think it's so cliche to say this, but Kirby practices so hard that games are easier. I think there's so much pressure on you. And I think Kirby Smart on the mic probably intimidates you more than the student section at Alabama. You know what I mean? I remember interviewing Dalen Everett. I don't know if you guys get him tomorrow. He told me the story. He said his freshman year, Kirby got on him so bad on the mic, he didn't realize he was getting on to him. He said when I got back to the end of the group, and the guy said, "Hey, he's talking to you." He's like, "He was talking to me," and they're like, "Yeah, dude, he was ripping you." So I think the pressure and the accountability. They do the bloody Tuesdays and all that, but the amount Georgia tries to put you in game type situations, and I know you hear that coaching type. We want
Mhm.
practice to be just like game. I can promise you, at Georgia, practice is just like a game. So when you get into those situations, you don't really panic as much.
Well, that's something that, you touch on, and that I remember hearing a lot of players say in interviews, especially when they're preparing for the NFL draft and stuff like that, is it got to where when they were in the games, they were not nearly as tired
Yeah,
as the
yeah,
rest of the team because, like you said, practice
yeah.
was harder than the games, and so it really helped them in the long run, especially when you get into that fourth quarter and you're down 7 or you're down 14, and you got to kind of
Mm.
step it up a little bit and take the lead and try to win the game.
You think about how many times Georgia's beaten teams in the second half over the last 3 or 4
Yeah.
years. That is strength. That is conditioning.
Yep.
That is conditioning. Can you think when you're tired? I had a coach. He's no longer there, but I think it was maybe 2019 or 2020. I think it was 2019. Georgia went and played at South Carolina. It was the game DeAndre Baker had that pick six against Debo Samuel.
Yep.
The game at halftime was very close, or it was like Georgia had a 2 point lead, something crazy. Well, that coach told me that South Carolina went in the locker room. He said we were we were exhausted, dead tired. Georgia comes out in the second half. They go 4 drives, 4 touchdowns. They were ready to play, and they were in much better shape. That's not a Shane Beamer team. That was a different team.
Mhm.
So you look at those teams, and Georgia was in much better shape. How'd you do that? You were outworking people in the summer because that was the second game of the year. You were outworking teams in the summer. They were in much better shape. They go 4 for 4 to open up that second half.
So, what would you say going into, obviously finishing up the season last year, coming up just short against Notre Dame,
Mhm.
and looking ahead through the spring and this offseason, what would you say is probably the biggest question mark coming into this season for the Georgia squad?
Inexperience. I mean, I think they got 8 returning starters, 9 returning starters. Everyone look at it, and it's inexperience. And I think people get a little bit kind of panicked about that. I'm excited because you get a lot of guys that are just going to start for the first time. They're highly recruited players, and you get a chance to see these guys. Just because they weren't starting didn't mean they weren't really good players. They had guys in front of them. So I think inexperience is something that concerns you, but also should excite you. There's also some new blood in the. I mean, you look at all those guys, and a lot of those guys that left at least won one national championship. They won a couple of SEC championships, and you sit there and you grind for like 4 years, and you're like, man, I'm ready to go to the NFL. You know what I mean? And that's not to say they quit on last year, but this particular group, I don't think any of them, maybe one or two of them on paper, have ever won a national championship on that freshman team. This group of guys, this is their legacy, their team, and I think you're going to see some kind of renewed energy with some younger guys getting a chance for Georgia fans to see them.
Is there a certain position group that you would say that you're kind of interested to see how they perform compared to last year? I feel like the offensive line at the offensive line wasn't a normal offensive line that we've seen in years past, and so I'm kind of interested to see how they kind of mold and mesh together. Obviously, I'm excited about seeing the wide receiver group with having a lot of new guys coming in, and then also, they did a really good job of recruiting and getting some younger defensive linemen in that I think are going to have to make an impact right away.
Elijah Griffin's a kid I think we all agree he's got to play.
Yes.
And this is a guy that's, if he wasn't number 1, maybe number 2, at least number 3 overall player in the country last year. He's 305 pounds. He just ran a 4.75 40 in testing, which is super freaky. And this is
our neck of the woods, Savannah.
Yeah, so this guy's got to play. I think he's going to play. I think the offensive line is a group that's got the question marks around it. But you got to get guys. You take Monroe Freeland, who was, one of the top 2 offensive linemen in America coming out of high school out of Charleston, South Carolina. He had a bad game against Notre Dame. But what people don't realize is his shoulder was shot. Like, he had surgery 2 days later. He played Notre Dame, didn't play great. He had to have surgery just 2 days later. Ernest Green was unhealthy for most of the year, wound up, he had to come out of the Ole Miss game because he was banged up.
Yep.
So you look at these guys, and can they play tackle? Can they're healthy? Are they back? The pieces are there. It's just how you play as a unit. I think, look, man, I know people have opinions of his dad, but I'm telling you right now, Drew Bobo is a freaking NFL player. I mean, this guy is a damn baller. Everybody I talk to, how athletic he is. They lost Jared Wilson, who was a 4th-round draft pick. They're not losing an ounce with Drew Bobo. This guy's an unbelievable center, very smart, team leader off the field, coach's kid, what you would expect.
Yep.
But I think people are going to realize when Drew Bobo's there how good they're going to be up front. He's going to help things. And I heard Jason Kelsey talking about playing center, and he was like, nowadays you have to be able to pull. Not only do you have to get to the second level, you have to make the calls, but you have to be able to pull and get out in front of people. And I think Drew Bobo is going to be a guy there who's going to bring some physicality. Michael Morris, kid out of Southeast Georgia from Camden County. Look at Jamal Merriweather, kid out of Brunswick, down there. What can he do? Where is he at? You look at Daniel Calhoun. I'm going to tell you the guy that, you may not hear like right now, but come time like Florida, which I feel like is kind of the midway point, like Juan Gaston, the freshman out of Westlake. This guy's 6'7.5", he's 350 pounds. He's talking about a damn dancing bear now. And this guy is going to play this year. I'm telling you right now, whoever's in front of him has got their work cut out for him because he could play right tackle, he could play right guard, he could play left guard. I mean, this guy's special, and I think he's going to play as a freshman.
Fired up to get it going on the college side, at least in a little over a month. I know your stuff gets wired up a lot faster than that, but Rusty, appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, man, appreciate y'all having me.
Again, Rusty Mansell, co-owner and publisher for Dawgs HQ, also a lot with the Georgia high school recruiting side of things.